Republicans called the governor's bluff by walking out over cap and trade. But now she's throwing that ace up her sleeve, called an executive order.
If we don't take action right away, it is the next generation that will pay the price.
And Salem's ban on sitting is moving forward.
Passed the sit-lie ordinance immediately. The businesses in the downtown region are all at risk.
The problem is they still need to give these people somewhere to go. Enter a giant tarp over a park. No, I am serious.
That's the way it's going to be.
Don't worry, we'll break it down. The facts, not the tarp. And Washington Democrats, you're about to choose who you want for president. Just don't lick your envelope. Here's the story. Yet another item on the do not lick list. Hi there, I'm Dan Haggerty. Thanks for being with us. Welcome to the story. Now, if you are a regular, well, then you already know the secret handshake. But if you are new, trust me, it's real easy to learn. What we do is we want your feedback and comments and critiques. Let us know what you think about our coverage or what you'd like to see us cover for you. Use your phone, talk to me on Facebook or Instagram, send us an email, or follow us on Twitter at @TheStoryKGW and use the hashtag HeyDan. All the cool kids are doing it, and being cool is like the coolest. So let's get started. All right, we want to start tonight right with our big story, and it sounds like the final blow in the huge fight over cap and trade here in Oregon, but really, it's most likely the fight just getting started. We're talking about Governor Kate Brown's new climate change executive order. She signed it this morning after the legislative session basically crashed and burned. Republicans walked out over cap and trade, and then the Democrats ended the session early. It was all really nasty, but the governor is saying now she had to do what she had to do.
I thought it was important for the legislature to give it another try, and they did exactly that. Unfortunately, the Republican walkout has caused me to take executive action.
So Republicans say the governor can expect some lawsuits over this. Brown says that she's worked with the Department of Justice to make sure that it's all legal. She also said that they're used to getting lawsuits, which I'm not really quite sure how to take. I don't know if that's a good thing. So what exactly, though, is in this order? Let's break it down. Now, it has the same goal as the cap and trade bill to gradually lower emissions over time, and it directs a bunch of state agencies to do things to get this done. One of the big ones is telling the Department of Environmental Quality to put caps on gasoline and natural gas emissions. The order also includes a plan for more electric vehicles on the road and for energy efficiency requirements for new buildings and appliances, whatever all of that means, right? Those are some of the main points, but we are like you. We still have a bunch of questions about it. So we brought in our political expert, Len Bergstein, to help us out. First up, we asked him, how is the governor's bill, what she just signed here, different from the cap and trade bill?
It doesn't have any of the system of really the auction items where people would bid on trying to reduce their the allocations that they have for emissions, so that you would have a pot of money to be able to allocate to the others to offset some of the problems.
Okay, second question. How soon will we notice changes from the governor's executive order?
Some of this can be seen as just setting the ball in motion that'll keep going through next summer and through the election season, and may just have the rules set in place by the time that the 2021 legislative session is ready.
Last question for Len. With the walkout and the failed bill and now this executive order, did either side really win?
It's easy to be facetious. The winners are lawyers and lobbyists. So there's going to be a lot of legal challenges, and a lot of lobbyists are going to be working furiously through the next bunches of months and into the 2021 session.
Okay, if it seems like we've been talking about cap and trade forever, well, it's because we kind of have. But it is important to know, how did we get here? Oregon lawmakers have been trying to pass a cap and trade bill for more than 10 years. The first one in 2007 was actually sponsored by both a Democrat and a Republican, but it failed. Cap and trade again failed in 2009, and other versions of the program have failed every year since 2015. Now, last year it did seem like the Democrats in their supermajority would be enough to get it passed, but Republicans had a Hail Mary, beat the system by walking out and stopping a vote. Governor Kate Brown sent the state police to bring them back, but at least some of those senators had left the state, so police couldn't get them. Republicans eventually did come back on their own when Democrats announced that they no longer had the votes needed to pass cap and trade. So that brings us to this year, when they tried it all again, with a new bill that Democrats said would be better for rural Oregonians. But once again, as expected, the Republicans left. This time, Democrats didn't send the police after them. They just let the clock run out, then ended the session early.
The House is adjourned.
Now Governor Brown is following through with her promise to take executive action since they couldn't pass the bill. And that's how we got here. We should also mention that one of the biggest figures in this cap-and-trade fight is retiring from the legislature. Senate Republican leader Herman Bertschuger. He is the man who led the walkouts, and he is not running for re-election.
After 8 years, it's time for me to return home to my family. I'd like to sleep in my own bed at home.
Makes sense. He is thanking his supporters for sticking with him, especially during the walkouts. We're not quite sure what he's going to be doing now, but he says he's going to keep fighting for conservative causes through grassroots organizations. For our next story, we are zeroing in on Salem. I know what you're saying, Dan, you did that for like the last 10 minutes. No, we're going to be talking about the city of Salem, and more importantly, about yet another localized attempt to deal with the homeless crisis. Now, in this case, at their city council meeting last night, Salem took a pretty big step toward banning sitting and lying on its sidewalks during the day. Here's how one councilor described this whole thing.
We're stuck with a horrible situation, and I think this is making the best of it, which is still not a good situation.
All right, that's Tom Anderson. He said that before council voted. The final count, 7-1 in favor of this ban. Now, they do need to vote one more time to make it all official, but last night was a pretty big fat sign that this thing is very likely going to pass. Now, to be clear, when Anderson talks about a horrible situation, this is what he's thinking of. This is video from downtown Salem. We showed this to you last week. People lying on the sidewalks, sleeping there, up and down sidewalks, right in downtown. It is jarring to look at. There aren't public restrooms readily available down there, so it's obviously unsanitary. And if you are driving or you are walking through downtown, it is impossible to miss. In fact, we got an email just today from a business owner who said after 17 years operating there, he's moving his printing shop out of downtown Salem because he flat out can't take it anymore. Now, the crux of the city's dilemma here is courts have said cities can't enact bans like this, booting people from public property, unless they find somewhere for homeless people to go. Now, if you've seen our coverage here, you know that Maggie Vespa has been all over this story. You were in Salem last night covering it. You join us here now. The city's solution to that last bit is an interesting one. They plan to hang a giant tarp over a public park.
Yeah, exactly. It's a 7,000 square foot tarp, and it's one of two options that officials sort of suggested at the meeting last night. It's also obviously the more eye-catching one, and it's the only one that's going to be readily available at all hours. And based on what we heard last night, it's a go.
All right, let's get specific. Here's the park. It's Marion Square Park, and it's in downtown Salem along Front Street near Highway 22. The city wants to hang a 7,000 square foot tarp over this space. That'll cost them $5,200 a month or $62,000 a year. They'd also pay $19,000 a month for security and $5,000 a month to install and maintain 2 porta potties, which the city already owns. The city is also working with Arches, a nonprofit that already serves homeless people in Salem. They can take 128 people into their day center, but they can only do it between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. And the ban boots people off of Salem's sidewalks between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. So Arches can only help some of the time. Pouring salt into Salem's wound, the city was on track to pay Arches to extend the day center's hours and fix that problem. But to do that, they needed $74,000 a month from the state. And the bill promising that cash died during the GOP walkout over cap and trade. So now Salem is scrambling to set up a tarp over a park by the end of the month. City councilors last night argued it's way more humane than this, and it'll help businesses downtown stay afloat. Because frankly, this, they say, is keeping customers away.
We have zombie carts.
Here's what people at the meeting had to say last night.
It targets the homeless. For this and other reasons, the $250 fine proposed as part of the ordinance is obscene.
Pass the sit-lie ordinance immediately, with or without the provisions regarding additional shelter space for day spaces. Your economic base, the businesses in the downtown region are all at risk.
It is a travesty. It is inhumane. It is cruel. And that isn't who we are in Salem.
So obviously the Salem City Council disagreed with that last line because, again, they approved this first reading of this ordinance 7-1. They need to vote one more time to make this thing official, and that's now been scheduled for 2 weeks from yesterday, which is Monday, March 23rd.
And if they approve it during that vote, it's a go.
Assuming nothing crazy happens, of course it always could. We're talking about politics, but yeah, if nothing kind of comes out of the blue and screws this up, this would enact immediately.
Now, people who advocate for the homeless community, typically they sue for something like this. This could end up in a courtroom somewhere very, very quickly.
100%. There was a big precedent a few years ago in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and basically it said that bans like this were unconstitutional if they happen in cities where homeless people have nowhere to go. They don't have enough shelter space, which we know Salem has struggled with in the past. And around that same time, advocacy groups started monitoring ordinances like this. One of them is called the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty. It's out of D.C. And according to their research, as of last year, 55% of U.S. cities had one or more laws on the books prohibiting sitting or lying down in public, kind of like this one. The number of ordinances like this across the country has jumped 78% since 2006. And that said, according to the center's own studies, when ordinances like this are challenged in court, they're struck down around 57% of the time. And it is worth noting, again, the city of Salem has flirted with ideas like this in the past, but they never really moved forward with it because they didn't have that shelter space. And now we're talking about this tarp over the park and the day shelter space. And I'm told that the legal staff with the city of Salem are confident that this one, because of those factors, will hold up in court.
All right, Maggie Vespa, thank you so much. We appreciate it, and we'll, of course, keep you updated on that. In the meantime, I do think it's important that we do talk about coronavirus for just a minute. We did have our first case in Multnomah County today, which isn't really a surprise, right? We knew this virus was going to continue to spread, but I have a couple of charts I want to show you. Yes, exciting charts, right? The first one is from Johns Hopkins University, and it shows the outbreak in the U.S. And what you're looking at there, those circles, those are the hot spots. And if you're one of those people wondering why hand sanitizer and cleaning products have been selling out everywhere in our area, it's because I think we might have the biggest circle on the map. And that's why we here at the news have been telling you every hour on every station that you watch to keep washing your hands and to stay home if you're sick and to take precautions that work for you and your family. And this next chart shows why that's so important in an area that's seen a spike in cases. This is called flattening the curve when dealing with an outbreak. If communities don't take precautions, you get that red bell curve you see there that spikes hard and can overwhelm hospitals with patients. But when people take precautions, the cases, they spread out over time. And while people still do get sick, hospitals can keep up. We've already seen this play out, right? As Oregon has been struggling to keep enough testing kits available. Luckily, people out there do seem to be taking this very seriously. I mean, just look at the sports world. Right now, we're waiting to hear from the NCAA about March Madness, but some other tournaments have taken some really unprecedented moves. The Big West and the MAC tournaments will still be played, but with no fans. We're talking empty seats. Nobody will be there. The Ivy League, they canceled entirely. And look, I'm not really sure a lot of people would be flying out to those games anyhow right now. Airline prices have plummeted because people aren't taking flights. And while you can still find a super cheap flight to, let's say, Las Vegas, for instance, we learned today that you won't be able to find a buffet, like nowhere. MGM closed their buffets at Aria, Bellagio, MGM Grand, all of their other casinos. I mean, what's the point? So look, if coronavirus is top of mind, keep it top of mind. You're being a good neighbor. You're being a good Oregonian or Washingtonian. If you don't believe me, here are two much more famous people describing it in a much more awkward way.
CJ, do kids need to miss school, practice, or their games to keep from getting the coronavirus?
Kids, if you're feeling fine, it's important that you go to school, see your friends, and do all the things you love to do. If you're feeling sick, though, go ahead and stay home just to be safe, just like you would if you had the flu.
Sounds great, CJ.
Anytime, Governor.
Washington's got 89 delegates up for grabs tonight, and you might have noticed it's gotten a little heated on Portland's airwaves between the remaining candidates. Welcome back. We see you guys tweeting at us. Keep it up. Grab your phone. Use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Send me a message on Facebook. We'll read some of your comments at the end of the show. Hey, if you are in Washington, hopefully you got your mail-in ballot. If not, well, you've got less than 2 hours to pick a presidential candidate. And since the Democratic race is down to basically two people, tonight's primary is kind of important. 6 states are voting today, and Washington is one of the big prizes. 89 delegates are at stake. Of the other states voting, only Michigan has more. Our neighbors in Idaho are also voting. They've got 20 delegates up for grabs. By the way, it's too late to mail in your ballot right now, so put it in the drop box if you haven't yet. But We've talked about this before, but it's really important if you want your vote to count. This is something that people have been discussing a lot. On Washington's primary ballot, there are check boxes on the outer envelope where you're required to check whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. And here's why. Washington doesn't register voters by political party, but in a presidential primary, you can only vote for a candidate in one party. Washington's ballots list both. That's why voters have to mark their affiliation on the outer envelope. If the vote inside doesn't match the box you've checked on the outside, then it doesn't count. And this is obviously confusing a whole lot of people. A Seattle Times reporter tweeted that there have been 60,000 returned ballots without a party checked. We know more than 2,000 of those are here in Clark County in this area. And if you're sitting there thinking, wow, this really sounds like an invasion of privacy, a lot of people do agree with you. The party affiliation that you check is public record for 60 days, which is basically so campaigns can add you to the mailing list that they want to send out. Now, Washington's own Secretary of State has said that she's going to skip voting, actually, in this primary because of this very thing. And a Republican state senator from Pierce County just sponsored a bill that would require an extra envelope for presidential primary ballots to protect voter info.
One of the questions we've gotten a lot is, hey, we cast our vote 2 weeks ago, and now we see that the candidate I voted for is not in the race, and can I get a new ballot?
So if you've already dropped off your ballot and you messed up, that part, don't worry too much. Election officials will follow up with voters who didn't check a box and give them a chance to correct it. But that's about the only thing that they'll let you fix. You just heard from Clark County Auditor Greg Kimsley, and he's talking about that next point about how you can't really make a change there. No, you can't. Sorry, if you marked your ballot for, say, Warren or Buttigieg and haven't turned it in yet, you can switch your vote pretty easily. Just cross it out and vote for someone new. But again, once you drop it off, it's final. Unfortunately, Washington hasn't been posting results as they come in, so we don't know yet just how many votes those dropouts got. While it's important to vote and make your voice heard, here's a friendly reminder: whether healthy or sick, please don't lick. Instead, the Washington Department of Health recommends a few alternative ways to seal your ballot envelope. For instance, you can use a wet sponge or a cloth. The concerns here is, of course, over coronavirus situation there, since the infected person's saliva can spread the virus. One Twitter user responded with their own plan for the envelope situation and shared a photo of Jax, the, quote, official stamp licker. Let us know how that goes.
When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government.
As the fight between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders for the Democratic nomination ramps up, you may have noticed attack ads like this one airing recently. It's from Senator Sanders and accuses Biden of working with Republicans to cut Social Security. We had a viewer write in and take some issue with the ad, saying that it was misleading and taking out of context. And it appears that they are right. The Washington Post did a fact check on this particular quote, and it's from 1995 when Biden gave a speech in the Senate during a budget battle, and the quote references a previous budget crisis that happened in 1984. At the time, the government was facing soaring budget deficits under President Reagan, and that had members of both parties concerned. So Biden, another Democrat, and two Republicans proposed a simple solution: freeze all government spending for a year. Biden pitched it as a last-ditch effort to avoid a recession. He also said it would prevent making significant changes to Medicare and Social Security. The plan ultimately got voted down, although more Democrats than Republicans did support it. The misleading part about the Sanders ad is that it makes it appear Biden was targeting Social Security specifically when his proposal was aimed at all government spending and reducing the budget deficit. Some of you had some questions about last night's Inside Woodlawn, like how are kids able to go to school if they live outside of the city, or in some cases outside of the state? We've got some answers for you when the story continues. Last night on The Story, we aired the latest episode of Inside Woodlawn. It's our year-long series from inside of Northeast Portland Elementary School, and we introduce you to a woman whose entire job is to help families who are struggling with things like food and rent. But part of Kristen Severance's story last night got some people talking. Let's take another look.
Just as gentrification has changed almost everything at Woodlawn,
there's such a high need for resources, and
it's changed Mary's position too.
My role has shifted. Needs of families have shifted. Families still need help paying rent, and they still need help keeping utilities turned on. But what changes is they don't live in our neighborhood now. They live in the numbers, or they live in Vancouver. I do outreach in counties that I've never looked into before, but if our families live there and that's where they need help, that's where I'm going to look for that assistance.
More than half the families at Woodlawn can't afford to live in the neighborhood. So they've moved to neighborhoods they can afford and drive their kids to Woodlawn.
I am a firm believer that Portland is a city that replaces Black people with Black Lives Matter signs. It is so true in the neighborhoods that are being gentrified.
All right, so after that, we got a comment. Take a look right here. Les Schlieve wrote this. He said, it was reported that parents of some students not only live outside of the Portland School District, but outside of the state of Oregon. Why was this not reported as parents committing fraud? Kristen Severance joining us here now. What does the school say about that?
All right, so we did an entire episode about this. Inside Woodlawn, episode 3 is all about how half of the students at the school do not live in the neighborhood. Their parents drive them in. And I asked the principal, Andrea Porter Lopez, in that episode, so do they not have to provide documentation? And she said, oh no, they do. But she feels if a student starts going to school there in kindergarten or first grade or second grade and has to move, and their parents want to drive them back, she said she will never make a child, leave the school. Once they're in Woodlawn, they're part of the Woodlawn community.
And a big part of the Woodlawn story is gentrification and families getting priced out of that neighborhood. But is the district okay with this?
I mean, look, I did an entire episode on this. I think the story was 8 to 10 minutes. I mean, it's no secret. She's very transparent about it. She's very open, that this is happening. Once a student goes to school there, they're part of that community.
Kristen, thank you. And look, we are bringing you into that community through this series, Inside Woodlawn. So these are the types of questions and conversations we want to have here in our entire community as a whole. So as you continue to have more questions based on this coverage, please reach out to Kristen, reach out to us here at The Story. Use the hashtag #HeyDan. Kristen, thanks.
You bet.
All right, here's something we think is worth your time. It's a documentary from the Oregonian called No Mercy. You're probably familiar with this story. It's about the sex abuse scandal involving the head of Portland-based Mercy Corps. The documentary just won a big award from Picture of the Year International. We just wanted to give it a quick shout out to some of the other people doing really great local journalism here in our area. So please check out this documentary on the Oregonian's YouTube page. All right, we're going to read some of your comments and finish the story. Keeping Portland weird tonight, a local distillery joining the make-your-own hand sanitizer craze. We've been telling you how all the hand sanitizer have been sold out because of coronavirus fears. Well, turns out Shine Distillery is using a little byproduct of their distillation to make their own sanitizer. It's 80% alcohol, so it hits the CDC guidelines to be effective. They're giving it away for free, too. How about that? Last week, though, Matt Safino and I, we tried to make our own hand sanitizer here on The Story. Key word there being tried. It was a pretty big mess. I thought we did an okay job. It was like a nightmarish science fair project. If you missed that, you can watch that on the KGW YouTube page right now. And we've got to say it one more time. Everyone, forget the hand sanitizer. Just keep washing your hands. Look, I want to get to some comments tonight. I love this one. Dan, I'm a senior citizen. I know hashtag means to put a hashtag in front of Hey Dan, but where or how do I use it? I have no idea. I'm not one of those social media platforms. Don't want them. That's from Paul Sullivan from McMinnville. Hey, Paul, just do you, man. I read your note. Send it that way. You're cool. For everybody else, use the hashtag #HeyDan. Also, Gia writing in saying the story reminds me of a current events class. We had to read the newspaper and bring an article in that we wanted to discuss or dissect. Nice job making the news more conversational but fact-based. You are welcome. That's exactly what we're trying to do, though I feel Kent isn't really buying in. He said, hey, Dan, how much to buy out your contract and get you off the air? Asking for a friend. Miss the normal news. This show sucks. Hashtag bring back Kathy. You know what? Kathy actually sits right across from me. I'll see if I can recruit her, get her in here, and maybe bring you back onto our team. Or not. Either way, that's the story.